Hello everyone, today we're taking a look at the rubber quad Squirrel 03. Of course, this has the 03 video system in it, and you can also get this with HD0, or you can buy all the parts as a kit and then assemble it yourself, or you could just go for the frame itself and then bring in your own parts. This is a little bit, in my particular case, a unique quad, and as you're looking at it here, you might not notice, but when we turn her this way, we've got all our major components about as close to the prop line as we can, all our big heavy ones at least, and then of course our battery right here. And this is a 3.5 incher, and it can come in at under 250 grams if you use a 4S 650 battery, which that will be in this particular flight. Now obviously I got a little bit of a turned up prop there, and I've had plenty of my own crashes, but this is one that Joshua Bardwell had, and I watched his video on mute to keep our thoughts or things we might say separate, but I will link his video down in the video description. And I think there's one really important part about that, and that is this didn't come like brand spanking new, not fresh carbon or tightly tightened screws or anything like that. This had been flown by Joshua. I don't know what in his video maybe he flew and we didn't see, so there's always that kind of outlier. I'm not trying to suggest he was hiding something. It's just that, you know, maybe some flights didn't make the video for length or whatever reason. So there's some things we're going to talk about that are going to be very, very important, so I'll probably say them more than once. Rubber Quads calls this the 3 Quack 5 motors, which are 1604, 4040 kV. And the props are HQ 3.5 inch, 2.5. Of course, they are tabulated. The flight controller down there, well, with the USB port right here by my fingernail, but it's been relocated up here for the wiring and accessibility purposes. That is the Airbot Phoenix all-in-one flight controller. Of course, as mentioned, we've got an 03 camera up front and the 03 VTX in the back. And we have the SD card slot as well as the USB-C port widely available to us. We do have a capacitor right there off the board where the battery leads can connect. We've got 3D prints out here on our arms to protect the ends, as well as give us a little bit of a skid protection. We also have 3D prints around the VTX and of course around the battery tray or the battery strap as well. Note that camera, not soft mounted at all, and it does give you the ability to slide the camera back and forth and use 2 screws if you choose to, so you can have some camera protection if you want to. Or you can just move it forward. Uses a 3-plate design. We've got a top plate, a bottom plate, and then we've got our arms that interconnect right here in the center with a screw straight down through. 2 plates at the rear that kind of connect back here, and that holds our VTX. And then we have a similar design, which you've kind of already seen, to hold the camera. Comes in between the 2 plates. Then it has this little print with a standoff in there. Note that Rubber Quads also has their own branded standoff. It weighs 172.25 grams. Up 2.6. As previously mentioned, with the G&B 650 milliamp 4S battery, we get under 250 grams at 242.33 grams. With the 850 milliamp 4S G&B battery, it weighs 259.29 grams. And with the Beta FPV Lava 850 4S battery, it weighs 267.52 grams. The arms must be about 4 millimeters thick. The very bottom plate is about 1.5 millimeters thick, and the upper plate is about the same. Earlier I said this uses a 3-plate design. It really doesn't, because we have the top plate, we have the arms, and then we have this circular plate here, and then we have the bottom plate. That plate right there, I can't really get a bite on it with my calipers. But second from the bottom plate, I'm guessing is right around 4 millimeters thick. This piece right here looks just as thick as the arms, and those are 4 millimeters. Never mind the wobble. I had just touched the quad before I set it down on the desk. So I wanted to bring this up a couple of times during this. So I had some breakage, and we'll talk about the breakages. And the reason why I want to make sure I preface this is that this is, again, not a fresh quad straight from the factory or something like that. This has been flown, and from what I saw in Joshua's video, it looked like it was maybe falling from about 15, maybe 20 feet, and it was coming down on his kind of gravel driveway there. So that's something to be aware of, and I should have kept a tally, but a few times in his particular video. And of course, as I previously mentioned, we don't know what didn't make the video. Not that he's hiding anything, it's just you never can tell. You know, we aren't there, so we don't know whether it was cut for time or whatnot. But I appreciate Joshua, and I appreciate Rubber Quads in sending this along. I don't think this is going to continue to make it. It was supposed to be sent from one YouTube creator to another, and I don't think that's going to continue, not because of any sort of experience I had with it. It's a different reason. It doesn't need to be discussed here. It's not my news to share. But at any rate, I felt kind of privileged because, you know, Joshua's got a really big channel, and he gets lots of attention and views. So to be second in line, that was kind of a big deal for me. But the thing that comes out about this quad, so we have all this of the components, the major components of the quad, right kind of as close to the prop line, I think, as we can get. Maybe there's another way to do it out there and I just haven't seen it. And I think in turn what that does is it just kind of makes the quad very smooth. I really felt like it made me much more of don't want to say it a bunch of times, a smoother freestyle pilot. Because I think I tend to be a little bit snappy, a little bit jerky. And I really didn't feel that way with this. Of course, you can use Expo, and you know the PID tune has something to do with that. So this has been tuned by Rubber Quads themselves. This is their build. And, you know, they've gone all out with the tune, I'm sure, in many, many flights and getting things just right. And they probably black boxed it out and did all sorts of stuff. But I was constantly coming away and thinking, boy, this is awful smooth. Now, of course, 3.5 inch, if you're new to FPV, is kind of a prop size in the micro arena that can really get out of hand if you're new to FPV or if you haven't developed your skills. Even if you watch me doing those punch outs, kind of, well, they're intended to be chimney dives, but I'm missing it several times. So even if you're seasoned, you know, it's always best to kind of take a flight or a few flights and just kind of get the feel for quad before you just flat out cut it loose. That's just a safety thing that I think we need to take to make sure we don't damage things unreasonably and just coming out a little too gung-ho out of the gate. But yeah, smooth, and I did have 2 arms that needed to be replaced, and I've got some other breakages that we'll talk about. Again, Joshua had crashed this previously, so it wasn't just my crashes that had those breakages. I'm sure those other crashes had an impact on those parts, although the arm that he replaced in his video is still on this quad and seems to be just fine. That's got to speak to some portion of it. I think another concern that people might have is the repairability. Replacing an arm, I didn't find to be any more of a stretch. Maybe in some cases it's even easier than other quads where you replace arms. And I think the other thing might be access to the all-in-one flight controller down there. That isn't too bad either, but we'll walk through that as well. You can see there the flight has ended. 650 milliamp battery, 3 minutes and 44 seconds. Not all my flights came in that long, but the battery's in good shape at 3.52 volts per cell. First up, let's talk about the damage report. So I've got the 2 arms that I mentioned, and one of them broke right here. And the other one broke in a somewhat similar spot, like if we orientate this up top. Again, I don't know if these were kind of already taking some hits, and then when I had my crashes, it just kind of did them in. I skimmed the chimney on one of my final flights and kind of pulled some of the carbon fiber off right over here. I don't know how well that comes through camera. I don't think that's broken, is it? It's flexible now here. So it's flexible here. It's definitely weakened. It's not a clean break, but I was coming in along the chimney, and I can find the footage and put it up there, but I was coming along the chimney, and I must have just seared this along off the edge of the brick-facing chimney. I don't know how I would actually hit right there without hitting the motors. That doesn't make sense at all, actually, now that I kind of talk it through. Wonder how that did break. Maybe I hit the cement pad after hitting the chimney, because we've got the swimming pool equipment right after that, and that's all mounted to a cement pad. So maybe that's how the edge of that hit there. I'm not certain how that got damaged. I do believe it was in that crash. That was my recollection. But that's not the only damage. We've got this in the back. How am I going to show this? It's really hard to get on camera, especially with some good light on it. So right here, that plate broke. Actually flew it several flights with that broken like that. And it didn't seem to have any impact. Of course, there's risk with that. Like if I'd have had a bad crash, I could have snapped the other plate and then torn an 03 all up or something like that. So that's a potential possibility that we probably shouldn't do. But what I was actually doing was shoving it back underneath the top plate there between the 2 plates and then just kind of sandwiching it in. And it actually looked fine. But then after just one flight without a crash, I would come back to find that this had separated again. So that's another break point. And then the last thing that broke was, and I don't think I have the carbon, there's a piece of carbon that goes across there that goes through the loop of our battery strap. And I actually felt that break when I was hunkering down the battery. And with your battery sitting, right in here, getting your battery secure in there is going to be an important factor. Again, all the weight's going to, well, that didn't work. All the weight's going to be right there in the kind of the middle, within the prop line, or really, really close to the prop line. That's easy for me to say, right? So obviously this is the arm that Joshua broke, if I failed to mention that later in the video. So you're not going to have a lot of room for your cables just to be flopping about. So what I would do is I would put a twist in here, and I would get the battery kind of like this. Don't want to put too much tension on that balance lead. We need that to stay put so we can charge and run again. And then I would just kind of take the battery up here and then connect it. That way my battery lead over here would help it stay up out of the prop line. Because if you get any shifting this way, you're going to be ended up in the prop line. And I actually had a battery that did get some prop strikes. Something else that probably, I'm sure Joshua covered all this. He knows what he's doing. Not all the screws are hex. You can see up here we've got these, are those Torx? I forget the name now. But those are countersunk so that they're flush here. And I suspect, it's pretty much got to be, because I don't know that you can find a countersunk hex head. That might be out there. I just haven't seen it. But so they used hex or Torx screws up on the plates up front, and you can see here near the camera we got a regular button hex head. And then we've got, let's see, I can't see this stuff very well because I need my little specs. I think these are all typical hex. We already mentioned these, but here, see that, and get some light on that. And then the same place back here, those are regular hex headed. And you might be wondering about this plate having all these extra holes, and I suspect that's so that you can mount the HD0 VTX and possibly even Walksnail. Because right now the 03 is being held by the the 3D prints here, which is a good design. I really didn't, even with this broken, I really didn't have any problems with my 03 not being secure. And at first, when I got this thing, I saw the USB port right down here off that all-in-one. I was like, oh, good night. I hope I have a USB-C adapter so I can get down in there. But it was located up here. And this was all smashed up as well. So I got a flat screwdriver out and gently started prying around the edges to try to get that to where it was back in shape. And of course, it works still. So that's great. So something else that we were going to cover was the repairability about the top plate. And really when it comes down to, I had to loosen all these screws in order to replace the two arms that I broke during my time flying it. And you can see right here, my 03 is coming loose too. I need to push that back in. But really what you do to loosen that top plate up so that you can get, you can take it off in order to be able to get access to it. But just these 4 screws. These are just holding the flight controller here. And you can do that just by loosening the strap and then pulling it kind of out, one side or the other out of your way. And then you take your driver and you get it in there and you can loosen it up, or take it all the way off if that's what you need to do. Here you have to take it all the way out in order to get your replacement arm in here. Up here, it's just pinched, I believe. No, that screw goes all the way through. It's been too long. We're kind of stepping back in time here on me a little bit. But yeah, that screw goes all the way through. So I must have pulled it all the way out in order to replace the arms. Again, whoops, the 2 arms that I broke, I had to have taken those out in order to get the arms replaced, because this one shows it. They both have holes. You can see that they both have holes in the end, so those screws do go all the way through. But again, it wasn't that big a deal. I never ended up taking the top plate off in any of my repairs. I didn't even notice if it was getting wiggledy or loose, because I was probably just doing 2 screws and then replacing it, and then the next, whatever day, week, whatever it was, and I broke another arm, then I went back with 2 other screws or something like that. But so we have a fair bit of damage. Again, I don't know how much of this damage we can account for in my crashes, or how much we saw in Joshua Bardwell's video in the crashes and damage, or how much we didn't see. That really can't be accounted for. The makers of rubber quads said that usually they go through an arm about 100 packs, every 100 packs. So that's, again, that's going to vary depending upon any quad. If you ask on Facebook for a particular quad frame and how many breakages people have, it's going to vary from I've never broken one, been flying it for 4 years, versus I break one every 3 packs. You know, it depends on the flying space and the pilot. So there's huge variables, but we always tend to cover these things, and so we've done that. Obviously, I pointed to it earlier. This is the arm that Joshua replaced. He uses electrical tape, but it does come if you get the kind of the bespoke build. I don't know if the kit comes with that. I didn't see that included, but the tape I talk about a lot on the channel, I used to call it Emax tape, but it's not really a fabric tape either, because it doesn't collect dirt and debris, stuff like that. This one is the one that I put on, so that's a little bit more fresh. I think I may have done this one too. And you can see I've got a couple of nicks in the wires here as well. So that must have come when I broke an arm and things were flopping around. I did have a battery ejection as well, and that's another reason why you want to hunker down your battery. I do think the silicone on here would help to some degree, as well as having fresh battery mats. These essentially have no tackiness left in them at this stage. And again, I can't count for these things too much, but I tried to kind of lick my fingers and clean them off. I didn't want to get any liquid down on the flight controller because I was preparing to fly. So I'm not certain about these battery pads that are being used, how tacky they are. But obviously they've gathered some debris, and they're smooth, just rubberized now. But again, my overall impression of this was that it was very smooth. And for those of you that come to the channel regularly, did it make me look smoother as a pilot than you're used to? Just kind of a gut reaction sort of thing. I'm curious about that, because when I watched the flight back, I kind of thought, man, I look way smoother than I normally do. Normally I'm kind of herky-jerky, snappy sort of, over corrections every once in a while, and then have to make a micro correction after that, sort of back and forth. But I really felt like this one was just very, very smooth. Of course, this is kind of a bespoke build. If you get one fully built up, and you do have to pay for the price of having someone build it up, that's a choice you have. You can choose that route. You can buy a frame kit if you want to have a similar experience and build it up with whatever components. Maybe you have some around that you're thinking of, or they're in your bins. You can also buy a kit as all the components that you see here, fully not assembled, and then you assemble it yourself. I'll put a link down in the video description to the Rubber Quads website, which is also where I got those gloves. They're kind of out of reach just over here. They're heated gloves, which I know some people felt strongly that they were overpriced because there were better solutions. But for myself, and trying a lot of those cheaper solutions with like heat stuff inside the gloves, and taking a cheap pair of gloves and putting a slit in them on the finger and the thumb, none of them worked out for me. And maybe I didn't find a golden pair. But so far, for me being a pincher, flying in, temperatures right now, or not this moment, but during the daytime, it would have been 28 degrees today, and it's only going to get colder at some point in time. It'll warm up, and it'll get colder again. We'll see how harsh this winter is. Those gloves could be very, very important, specifically even if I'm just doing battery testing for flight time on different quads, to help keep my hands warm. I'll put a link to the gloves down below if you're looking to pick up a pair of wintertime flying gloves. I know I could sit inside, but I lose a lot of my feeling of flight, and I don't fly very well when I can't hear the quad at all, ever. I just kind of tend to lose track of things. Maybe it doesn't come out in videos. Well, I haven't posted one with that, but I feel like I have less control, and I'm not really in touch with the quad when I fly inside, with the quad being outside. Of course, that also impacts video performance, and I can't really do that because if people are looking at summertime or warmer weather versus winter, they might not pick up that detail, and that kind of shadows things. But so for me, those gloves could be very, very important in helping keeping me going during the wintertime. But if you're interested in the Squirrel 03 or the HD0 version, kit, frame, what have you, there'll be a link down in the video description. If you have any comments, questions, or suggestions, please let me know in the comment section below. I appreciate your time. Thanks for watching.